Hey Trails Collective, Ian here, coming at you this round with a review of Topo's Ultraventure 2, another model we were really anxiously waiting for and have been really quite happy with so far. This model released, I believe, in February 2021. I received it, I think, right around the new year, and I have maybe 100 miles in it so far, and I've been really happy with it as a pretty versatile shoe. So let's just get right into it.
We watch the sunrise through the windows of our car, passing giants on the road, standing guard in the dark. And I saw you, so then in secret I felt like the jumper off the bridge, and the water down below will be keeping this, and I will let you cause I wanna be like the wind, I wanna run with you, we can be wolves, howling at the prey wild moon. I wanna be by your side when we light up the sky for the world to see. Run, 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 run with me.
Let's take you through first some of the specs. So weighs in at 10.4 ounces in a men's 9 and 8.3 ounces in a women's 7. The initial size runs are a bit delayed getting in the store, so I can't verify those weights, but that's what the listed weights are. Stack heights, insole, 3.5 millimeters, lasting inside of the shoe, for midsole around 15 millimeters in the heel, 10 millimeters in the forefoot. Base outsole rubber, which is basically just a thin strip underneath the lugs there, around 2 millimeters. And then the lugs themselves depth are 5 millimeters. And I'm pretty sure that this is the first shoe that I've received where the actual stack height measures, which is what's published, actually are consistent with what I am measuring in-house. So as I mentioned in prior reviews, I started questioning some of the stats that I was getting and some of the inconsistencies even within brands, let alone comparing brands with the stack height measures. And I'd look at some of the major reviewers online just republishing the stack heights and not really getting in there and measuring them to see that there was some inconsistency there and some questions on really what they were measuring. So I got my own measuring devices, and I'm working on one for midsole density as well. So hopefully I'll be able to start weighing in on some of those measurements just because they're usually not posted. So taking the digital caliper, going from with the insole in, from the top through to the outsole lug, combined stack is 30 millimeters high in the heel, 25 millimeters in the forefoot for a drop of 5 millimeters. And again, kudos to you, Topo, for sending me stats that actually line up with my own in-house measures. The cost, $135, which I think is pretty fair. I think up $5 from the Ultraventure 1. And yeah, all right, so I'm gonna get into it with the upper, midsole, outsole, some of the takeaway points and comparisons, and close it out. So starting with the upper. So the upper, they use an engineered mesh material. Some of the other brands that have come out have used an engineered knit. The North Face that we most recently reviewed, wear testing a Salomon Cross Pro right now, also uses an engineered knit. This is more of an engineered mesh. Thin, breathable, nice. Difference between the Ultraventure 1 and the Ultraventure 2. Ultraventure 2, or Ultraventure 1 rather, had more of the polyurethane laminates kind of encapsulating the upper for sidewall or quarter panel support. And the Ultraventure 2 nixed those. Some thin strips of polyurethane still on there, but really shaved off the polyurethane laminates they had in there prior. They basically swapped that out in design with a really soft perforated, it's a microfiber that's on the inside, which you can see that mesh right there, and that just adds a little bit of integrity to the quarter panels or sidewalls to give it a bit more integrity. And I think that was a really nice trade-off and design. They have an encapsulated toe with a TPU or laminate that wraps from the toe all the way through to the hind foot to merge with the heel collar area. Does a good job for abrasion, and unlike one of the models that I reviewed more recently with the North Face Vective, which used a similar TPU laminate, which didn't have any perforations and really held the water, Topo's done a really great job of accounting at least a bit for that with putting perforations in that laminate to allow water to push out when you submerge it. One of the changes between the Ultraventure V1 and the V2, they moved those perforations from the lateral side of the forefoot to the medial side. I think just for most footfalls, in terms of a typical foot strike, you're getting some degree of pronation and push through to that midfoot. So I think it does make more sense to put them to the outside so it can push that water out a little bit better. I think probably they could have retained the perforations on the outside as well. And that probably, well, it would have just added to the drainage capacity. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in just a second. That goes back into a fairly traditional heel collar. It has some padding down around your malleoli. It has some degree of an internal heel cup. You could see it more in the V1. It's still fairly soft back here, but there's just a really thin piece of what I imagine is just a thermoplastic set in the layers. In the V2, they changed the heel design a bit through changing the padding and putting in a more substantial, basically heel wrap or cup. It's designed, and most people point out that they were using it as a gaiter attachment, and it does for sure work as the gaiter attachment. But the reason I think was more than just aesthetic. I think in terms of the update, the V2 I believe just gets a more stable cradle in the hind foot. And that was something that was first released in their Topo Ultraventure Pro, which we reviewed a month or so ago. They also first used that design and then also rolled it into the Ultraventure 2. Has a nice deep heel pocket. I get a pretty good grasp there on my calcaneus and heel, and it's actually quite nice. One change that's not listed in the specs, but that I noticed fairly quickly, is that they made a change to the depth of the heel collar. So the Topo Ultraventure V1 just swooped down a little bit lower around the malleoli. This one comes up about 6 millimeters higher around your malleoli. I'm not sure totally what their intention was. It may have just how they got the external heel counter to work and having to come up a little bit higher in terms of integrity. But one byproduct, if not intention, was I think it does a little bit more effective job in keeping debris a little bit more from dropping down into the shoe, just because it gets closer to your malleoli and fills that gap. So whether by intention or not, I think it's a pretty nice update. The laces can sit, they're tubular, but they sit fairly flat over the instep or the foot. They have one change they made between the V1 and the V2 is they took the lace holes a little bit narrower in the V2. I think that's nice. Sometimes you'll see people occasionally crank down their laces and you get a pinch in that forefoot of the toe box. This allows it to stay a little bit more spread, not really get that pinch. It spreads out a little bit with external lace cords. They don't wrap down into the vamp or the quarter panels. I think more of just kind of an aesthetic design, but it works. Fairly traditionally padded and shaped tongue, and it does have webbing or gusseting on the inside. So all that pretty nice, good updates. They give you a gaiter O-ring or at the base of the tongue, and that pairs with the two clasps in the back, and that works with their branded Topo Trail Gaiter right there. Pretty nice design, and then it has a smooth midfoot there to allow you to put a strap potentially with another gaiter right through that midfoot. One of the counterbalances to having the perforations, and this is something that I first mentioned in a review of the Mountain Racer. One of the things that I've noticed is that their choice in insole being Ortholite. Ortholite in what they're using here. An Ortholite, big company, makes insoles for all of the brands. This one is an open cell foam, and it really just acts like a sponge to hang onto the water when you submerge it. I would have hoped that in the V2 that they would have changed that design, or the material rather, in that insole, but they didn't. Clearly not listening to my reviews. Just a downside and caveat to potentially could use a little bit more drainage around that polyurethane wrap. The midsole foam that they use is a multi-density or a 3-part EVA. Some of the brands have shifted, actually including Topo. Topo used in the Ultraventure Pro zip foam midsole, which in theory they're saying is more durable and with a higher energy return or bounce. I've had really mixed experiences at best with flight foam. Feel like it's kind of worked in some models, other ones not as much. I don't like it as much underfoot in the Ultraventure Pro package. I like them just sticking with the EVA. The EVA blend that they use is also a little bit softer than what they're using in the Mountain Racer. So if you're somebody that's tried on or aware of the Mountain Racer, just know that underfoot feel is going to be a little bit softer in the Ultraventure series. The 3-part design. So their softest will be this black layer right here, and that's just basically trying to give you a fairly soft heel crash zone or pad, and that dovetails with the camber of the shoe, which most shoes will have in the back to smooth an initial heel strike pattern. They have the base or largest composition of midsole material in the EVA through, which is this off-white or gray that wraps throughout most of the midsole. And then they have a firmer wedge, would be this blue in here, which just acts for a bit of medial posting for support of the profile or platform. EVA, I don't know. I'm really okay, I think, with EVA. There are some models and blends that have come out that have been more environmentally friendly than EVA. EVA is kind of nasty stuff. And EVA does compress or pack out a little quicker than some of the other materials. But I like the feel underfoot. In a trail shoe, I feel like it gives you enough protection. The Ultraventure does not have a rock plate in it, but with the depth of midsole and EVA, it really doesn't need a rock plate. The use of a rock plate in the Ultraventure Pro paired with the zip foam midsole made for a much too rigid ride, which also created a really sloppy heel and upper feel. This one's a little bit more dialed in, and I like the EVA. Outsole rubber. Outsole rubber, they're using a Vibram XS Trek. It is different than their Vibram XS, which they used in the Ultraventure 1. I had just, I think, been under the assumption that the XS Trek would be fairly close in function in terms of grip as the Mega Grip. I've had really good luck with the durability and grip of Mega Grip historically. I did go out and do head-to-head testing, which I'll plug in this review as well, of the major outsoles on the market, including a follow-up or a return round just to test the Vibram Mega Grip as well. Vibram still does perform pretty well, but this XS Trek that they're using in the Ultraventure Pro, not quite as grippy as what they use in the Mega Grip. Probably along the lines of what's used in the Salomon Contagrip TA, so it actually functions pretty well, just not quite as grippy as the Mega Grip compound. The outsole lug configuration, 5mm lugs, which offer a decent amount of grip even when it gets sloppy and off-camber surfaces. A good amount of spacing between the lugs. You don't tend to pack too much mud up in there that really has it stick. You have the flex grooves, which allow flexibility in the forefoot, and the rhomboidal design allows you a little bit more surface area to pull back when you're ascending in the forefoot, and a bit more grooves to make it smoother when you're descending. And almost all shoes and trail shoes will reverse the pattern in the hind foot of the shoe just based on the ascent and descent patterns. So all pretty nice there. One of the things that I noticed right out of the gates when I first got the shoe in was the toe spring. So the toe spring is the amount of curvature in the front of a shoe. Probably, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, going to a conference in Texas, I was riding with the co-founder of Ultra Running, Golden Harper. And at the time, I was working on the concept for a custom shoe company. It's something that I've revisited a couple times over the years, but I just haven't had really the resources to pull it off, which is kind of unfortunate because I feel like some of the tech I'm watching develop around some of the things that I wanted to do years ago. Just people with deeper pockets are going to get there first. But one of the questions that I had was about the toe spring angle, and Ultra being a brand that was really based on a more natural foot shape and design, they still were incorporating a certain degree of a toe spring or curvature in the front, which is just not natural. And so my question for Golden was, I'm really looking at the specs and the design of the shoe, the engineering, and I'm just curious why you didn't use a lower toe spring angle. And his response was that he had thought the same thing, and that he really wanted to try a lower, if not no, toe spring in the shoe to make it more natural. And his engineers told him that they could, but that the design, you'd really trip over it. And so he was like, well, I really want to try it. I got to feel it. So they created it for him in pre-production, and just that, it ended up getting trippy. And so that was kind of my first, I think, intro into, I guess, that concept of the different toe springs. Some of the models have been coming out this past year that I've tested, such as the Salomon Wildcross, one of my favorite shoes of trail shoes of 2020. One of the things that I did notice here was it had an increased toe spring angle. In running in it, I was feeling more splay between the aggressive lugs and the forefoot, and it just felt like there was negative space underneath my metatarsals. And I couldn't really place it, and I didn't actually dwell on it too much. One of the people that actually commented in here on the YouTube review of the Wildcross also commented on the feel, which got me to dig a little bit deeper into that toe spring angle. And what I found is that indeed, several of my models have had higher toe spring angles this year. And what I think I'm noticing is that it's putting a little bit more stress or irritation into the tendons and muscles in my metatarsals. So I'm basically more sore in the forefoot the day after a longer run in a shoe with a higher toe spring angle. So this is all to say that I was already thinking about the concept. When the Topo Ultraventure 2 arrived, one of the first things I noticed was that it has a lower toe spring angle, and actually I took the measurement by 10 millimeters versus the Ultraventure 1, and this is something that's not listed in it. And so I just sent a message to inside Topo with my reps, and they basically just said, yeah, it was a change that they made, that they feel that it makes the midfoot to forefoot transition of the shoe a little bit smoother to have the lower toe spring angle. But it isn't something that they publish anywhere just because they feel like it's, I guess, a little bit out of the bounds of what most people are really processing. What I'm finding, though, is in that toe spring angle, I think that they're right. I think it does make for a smoother midfoot to forefoot transition, and it's really quite nice. In any case, lower toe spring angle is another basically platform change between the V2 and the V1, and I think it does exactly what they intended it to do. For who's it for? So we had, as I mentioned, it being our number 3 shoe in the store as a whole last year. We've had a lot of success with it. Fits a good number of feet. They, as I mentioned, use a more anatomic design to the toe box. If you hold it up to an Ultra by comparison, the Topo is a little bit wider in the midfoot gauge, so you can see the Topo insole hanging out just a little bit, and it actually has a little bit more width around the lateral or 4th, 5th, actually 3rd through 5th toes on the outside of the foot. Ultra tends to swoop a little bit harder right around the big toe, but you lose a little bit in clipping off your 2nd or 3rd toe impact there. Probably the closest match would be the Saucony Mad River, a shoe that I like the Mad River 1 more than the 2, but also has a fairly similar toe box design and shape. So it just tends to work, I think, with a lot of feet, natural motion. It feels fairly light under the foot, has a good blend of cushioning as well as protection underfoot, and the lower heel to toe angles just make it a little bit more efficient. One of the drawbacks with the Ultraventure 1, which I think limited sales, was they had not great colorways, and so they just really weren't that attractive. The colorways coming out, there's one of the men's here, one of the women's here. There's two others in men's and women's. A lot more, I think, attractive colorways that will make it a bit more appealing for 2021. So I'm really happy with the Ultraventure 2. I think it's going to continue to sell really well for us, probably be our top-selling trail shoe. For those who aren't familiar with it, if it sounds like something that might be up your alley, definitely check a pair out. We have them in the Trails Collective store, as well as the Finger Lakes Running Company. And check out some more reviews on your own. Let us know what you think if you get a pair, how it wears, and if I have any issues with it longer term. With only 100 miles, I don't really have any durability issues so far. A couple aesthetic nicks here and there, but it's holding up just fine. Outsole rubber, not quite as durable as the Vibram Mega Grip or what Innovate uses in the graphene, but still fairly durable. So all around, I think great shoe, nice update Topo. I'll be excited to put some more miles in it when I can, and excited for you all to weigh in with any questions that you might have. All right, thanks for tuning in this round, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya!